Well, good afternoon. Again, want to welcome all to a special meeting of the Infrastructure Planning Advisory Committee today. This was called, I believe at our last meeting that we had, we discussed the procurement process that we had undertaken consistent with our executive order to pursue and to acquire the services of a consultant that could be of support to the state, to each of your departments. And we mentioned that that was coming to a close quickly, and the selection was in process, or actually at that point was pending a final approval, and that we wanted to meet quickly after final selection because time is of essence on many of these grants, and that we want to make sure that each department is prepared and informed of the opportunities coming before them. So with that, I just want to officially call the meeting to order now. I did a few opening comments earlier about the building and some of our facilities here. If anyone has questions, please refer you back to Troy Deal in the back, or one of our folks that are outside the room. Beth Thompson can help you. I'm happy to be joined by many of our members or their designees today. It looks like I think we're pretty much full here. I know the weather did delay some folks, and we appreciate you arriving here safely. If we have any concerns, let me know on that. But I appreciate you also hopefully found parking adequate. We've been trying to make sure we cleared that open for folks. So with that, I have several agenda items. So most of it, as I said, this meeting was intentionally not for decision-making purposes, but really to introduce you to a few key resources that will now be available to you and the members of this committee as we go forward. But before I do that introduction, I just wanted to update you on a few activities on the infrastructure efforts at a national level. We've attended and continue to attend meetings with the National Governors Association. Many of the states now have appointed advisors to the governor. Similar, as you know, Governor Hutchinson stepped out first, I believe, and formed this Planning Advisory Committee to be his counsel or advisor on this. And so I'm happy and pleased to chair this group, but representing you in many of these calls. Our staff has been attending and taking notes, and we try to share those with you or your staff. I know we've also set up a weekly status report or reporting structure so that we can keep all informed about what different opportunities are coming up from federal departments. And as those are identified by you or your staff, we're asking you to inform us of that. We also will now have some support from our consultant to make sure to true up that list and make sure we're not missing opportunities. And we're also hearing from stakeholders and engage, other folks that are watching this closely. In fact, we can talk about one opportunity that we just submitted through our Energy and Environment Cabinet today that we had not had sight on that through the NGA process, but one of our electric utility providers in the state had identified an opportunity on electric grid resilience. The applications are not due yet, but there was an opportunity for comment this week. So through their input and recommendations, we were able to reach out to the Public Service Commission and put together a few comments that we have now submitted as of this afternoon on that opportunity. So I would keep your ears and eyes open to all. I know we want everyone to participate and help us do the best job possible for Arkansas on this. So if anyone in the public is aware of an opportunity or a local community that they would like to bring to our attention, I believe this committee will be very responsive. And I know as chair, I will be responsive to make sure that information gets shared with the appropriate department, and that we quickly act to put the state's priorities in place and also provide support where helpful. So with that, there is an upcoming, what they're calling the second workshop that NGA is convening at the end of this month, or I guess we're now in June, right? At the end of June, back in DC with other infrastructure advisors. So if you have questions, I know that I'll be attending that as Arkansas representative toward the end of the month. So, and we will bring back that information and share what we learn at that meeting. But there's a monthly call that occurs And again, those notes are being taken. I know Tricia Treese, if you have, I call her out every meeting because between every meeting, she does tremendous work, as well as Dan Pilkington and a number of our staff. Dan's in the back of the room. We've got several of our other members, Leslie Cross and Bailey Taylor, and I guess even our energy folks here that are constantly keeping us informed. So I will mention that Larry Bingle is joining us by Zoom. He was out of state this week, so he is available by Zoom to contribute as needed. But with that, I just wanted to move forward into the rest of our discussions, which was really the objectives today, which was to meet our Deloitte team and let you know. And I also wanted to reach back out to TSS and the Office of Procurement. Thank Alex and Amy and others that supported us as we went through the procurement process. Your team did a fantastic job and really helped us go through that, and the members of this committee that sat on the selection committee also. So with that, we went through a process that was set up by Office of Procurement. We conducted the necessary steps to retain a consultant. And I think what was a very streamlined fashion, but also a very open, transparent fashion. And we will also end up, with what we think is the right product at the end of the day, and that we found I think a consultant that will help, that knows Arkansas, that appreciates where we're coming from, what we're looking for, and will work closely with us. And the way the contract was established, and I believe in your packet, a copy of the scope of what we put together through a working staff committee, which is basically sets up a master services agreement. So this gives you or your departments the ability to develop task orders, and they'll explain this better, but this would allow, if you have needs, say, to put an application together, or even stand up a program or implement a program, or even strategize on whether it's a program that Arkansas should pursue competitively, what would be the strengths, or better understand what the priorities might be in selection of awards. Deloitte would be standing ready to help you do that through a scope of work process, and that would provide you, based on what your desire is, a cost for that effort, and you would be able to immediately put them to work without delay, because all the legal and contractual terms have been established to do that outside of that defined cost of scope of work. Now, I believe that process, and Larry Walther is over here to hold me honest on this, has to go through I think once it's defined, the scope's approved, it would need to go through council review just to get final approval for you to move forward on that scope. So there is a legislative aspect of that to make sure it gets tied to an appropriation line. And so, but we can talk about that later, but that is the one administrative process that would be on the department to handle themselves. But the rest of the procurement side has been taken care of. So before I introduce them, though, I think it may be because of the committee attendance today, and we have several members of the council, but we also have a lot of designees. I'm just going to ask each person to kind of identify themselves and who they're representing today for the purpose of, so that Deloitte can also meet you as well. So with that, I'll start down at the end of the table, and we'll just come down the road real quickly.
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Thornton. Director Tudor's not able to be here, and Randy has another engagement he's going to need to head to very shortly, but I'm representing RDOT today.
Good afternoon, AJ Gary. I'm the Director of the Arkansas Division of Emergency Management.
Good afternoon, Chris Racy, Arkansas Game and Fish Chief of Staff.
Caitlin Bennett, I'm an attorney with the Arkansas Department of Agriculture.
Cynthia Edwards, I'm representing West Ward, Arkansas Department of Agriculture.
Larry Walther, Secretary, Department of Finance and Administration.
Julie Link, I'm the Chief Administrator of the Environment for the state of Arkansas.
Shane Corey, Chief Counsel for the Department of Energy and Environment.
I'm Alex Johnston, representing Secretary of Agriculture, Transportation, and Shared Services.
Jim Hudson, Chief of Staff for the Department of Commerce, representing Mike Preston, Secretary, Department of Commerce.
Tina Owens, Chief of Staff, Division of Emergency Management. I'm representing Secretary Cook for the Department of Public Safety.
Stephen Porch, Arkansas Department of Commerce, Chief Legal Counsel, and broadband guy.
Jonathan Askins. I'm the Director of the Division of Information Systems.
Wanda Campbell, I'm representing Waterways Commission for Cassandra Caldwell.
I believe we've got Administrator Bingo on the phone. Do you want to unmute and introduce yourself?
Hey, good morning. This is Larry Bengal. I'm the Chief Administrator for Energy and Environment.
Okay, thank you. He was off mute for a moment, but we were not able to hear you, Larry. So anyway, that is Administrator Lawrence Bingle. He is here at the Department of Energy Environment and administers our energy programs across the state. So, but with that, we'll go ahead and move forward as I ask the Deloitte team to come forward. And I guess Heidi, you might be, I don't know who's opening for y'all, but I will introduce or invite whoever's opening to come forward. And I'll ask you to make the appropriate introductions. I believe there's also a PowerPoint presentation that you'll be able to, it's on the screen. And
Thanks, Jerry. Good afternoon. And thanks to the committee for this opportunity this afternoon to just give you a little bit of insight into our team. And as the Secretary Q mentioned, the types of services that we're excited to be able to offer to the state of Arkansas. As we go to the next slide, sorry, Troy, I'm going to move fast. I talk fast. So as we move to the next slide, I did want to introduce the team. My name is John Rampilla. I've been with the firm for 23 years. And most of my time with the firm has been spent on large government transformation, create new state agencies. I've run shared services for agencies, and Heidi asked me to join this team, giving that transformational experience. I look forward to working with each of you. In addition to 23 years, about 10 years of that in parallel was as I was heading toward retirement as an Army JAG officer. So the last 10 years of my Army Reserve career was a JAG and also working with Deloitte. I'm going to mention two of our colleagues who couldn't make it here. One COVID positive, the other was a suspected COVID positive. So David Armani is a person who's going to be our day-to-day project manager. Phenomenal colleague. Damon, as you'll come to learn, is also an Army vet, so we have that bond. But David comes with 20 years of experience. One of those years was on the National Security Council as Director of Response Policy. He is absolutely the right person for this job. You'll learn about a DBIT tool, kind of looks at all this funding and helps make sense of all the funding in a very nice, user-friendly way. Damon was one of the architects of the firm of that tool. So again, very lucky to have him. And I also mentioned Ben Laplin. I've known Ben. He's been with the firm for 10 years. I've known Ben for almost those full 10 years in different roles. Ben is going to keep Damon, Heidi, and I in order. He is phenomenal at keeping programs on track and on schedule. You'll get to meet Ben on a later date. Very detail oriented, very much fact-driven, great person to have, kind of coordinating our headquarters or our project management office effort. My other colleagues, instead of having them come up and I would trip over them, we'll have them introduce themselves, if that's okay, Secretary, before they speak. Each one is going to have speak. Okay. So if we could, we'll go to the agenda, and what we propose to do on the agenda is first talk a little bit about national IJA activity. And Secretary Q, you mentioned a good amount. I'm going to do a real quick survey of that. And then Heidi is going to speak about specifically the opportunity ahead for Arkansas. And also Heidi's going to share some of our infrastructure experience within the firm. Following that, Amy is going to talk about IJA services that we can offer to the state of Arkansas. And then Matt, in a little bit more detail, is going to talk about the program stand-up, a bit about that form to request our services and some of the ideas we have for the next steps to move forward. Okay. So with that, we'll move to the next slide. And good news for a rainy afternoon is that I'm not going to read every word on this slide. So as far as national IJA activity, we have seen a number of key themes throughout states and agencies that we operate in across the U.S. So, as you probably know,
Most states and territories have already appointed infrastructure coordinators. Many are standing up PMOs or expanding existing state PMOs. I did, wanted to piggyback on what you mentioned. Governor Hutchinson has been a leader in this effort, as is the state of Arkansas. You're leaning forward and you've been fast to act. So it's a great effort to date. On the grants management and funding perspective, we're seeing an unparalleled level of coordination and communication across state agencies. Some of the conversations we were having before the meeting started this afternoon is that many of these funding opportunities are cross-cutting across agencies, and the only way to really accomplish the intent is going to be to work together in collaboration. States are looking at the reporting, standing up more automated reporting systems. They're coordinating their grant systems. A lot of them are siloed now. I've talked to many states that have very siloed grant systems. So there's a huge opportunity to increase coordination, collaboration, and some of your technology assets. And the other piece is really kind of the reporting out to the citizens and the residents on progress to date. So transparency being very important. We're seeing some states establish public-private partnerships. We're also seeing a number of folks really kind of taking a look at the opportunity of IJA to help with supply chain challenges, right, for the infrastructure. We hear daily about supply chain challenges. IJA is not the total remedy, but offers some good opportunity around supply chain. And the other kind of cross-cutting area we had some conversation about is, the opportunity and innovation of electric vehicles and EV charging is an opportunity really that is ahead of us. The third major trend, again, probably no surprise, is many states, many planning commissions are really looking at the large mega projects right now. There are many other projects. I think Damon and team can identify more discrete projects. But a lot of folks now are focusing on the big things that really are going to move the needle. So we're seeing that across many of the states we work in. And then the fourth piece, kind of alluded to this again, is kind of innovation around infrastructure, and I'd expand that to also innovation in IT. In some ways, innovation in the way we operate, as government. States looking at alternative energy. I think hydrogen is a concern. Hubs, EV charging stations. And the last point here is probably one not to be underestimated is cybersecurity. Cyber is running through everything in IJA, and very important to keep in mind. We have a number of cyber experts on our team ready to go to kind of help you with some of the cyber challenges and opportunities ahead. Okay, so with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Heidi.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Heidi Green. Little background on me. I was with state government for over 8 years. I served as a senior advisor to Governor Perdue out of Georgia, and then was the deputy commissioner, and we call them commissioners in Georgia instead of secretaries. And so I was the secretary of the Georgia Department of Economic Development. So appreciate you all taking the time out of what I know is a very busy schedule. I also served as the chief of staff to the U.S. Department of Agriculture most recently, and I've been with Deloitte now for about 4 years. My role at Deloitte is twofold. One is I have the privilege of being the account leader for the state of Arkansas. And so here in Deloitte in Arkansas does work with your university system. We also do work at Department of Human Services and a number of other agencies. And so we have about, we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but we have about 700 practitioners who are currently supporting work in the state. So we're looking forward to getting to know some of you we already do work with, and we're looking forward to the opportunity to do more. The other job that I have at Deloitte, you have more than one job usually. So the other role that I play at Deloitte is I oversee state government relations for all of Deloitte. And this is in part, why I'm standing here today, because we spend a lot of time interacting with, for example, National Governors Association, NCSL. So we're really trying to make sure that we are seeing what the federal government is doing. We also have a large federal practice, so we are constantly in contact with those agencies so that we have a good insights around what is happening from the federal government and how that is going to flow to the states. So you can imagine for the last couple of years, I've been a little bit busy tracking what the federal government has been sending down to states and localities, and certainly IJA is no different. And Troy, we can go to the next slide. So that was more about me than I meant to say, but I think it kind of flows into the opportunity really that we see today. I think we originally briefed on this a few months ago for governor's offices and teams as Governor Hutchinson had done just an amazing job in helping to really advocate for the IJA funds. Infrastructure has obviously been out there, a want for a bill a long time, and it finally got passed. And you know, if you don't know, you should know that your governor was very instrumental in helping to make sure that happened under his leadership as chairman of NGA. So a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, about 60% of that is formula funds and about 40% of that are grant funds. It was the reauthorization of the surface transportation bill, which, you know, as Kevin knows, we have been waiting for, and so a lot of existing programs on transportation that were reauthorized. But then really the important piece here is that there were a lot of new programs created that have never been seen before. An example, the state and local cybersecurity grant fund was really important. The states have never been given direct funds for cybersecurity, and they were allocated funding, and it has a required match to it that continues to grow from a state perspective. So that's something that has to be thought through as planning occurs. Interestingly, though, there is a lot of cybersecurity is mentioned many more times across IJA, whether it is, you know, looking at making sure that you have cybersecurity in place for energy projects, for example. So that it's a long, I think it's we have it in a 2-page PowerPoint, all the different times that cybersecurity is mentioned. And this is just one example, right, of what sits in this bill. As we look across it at what we see is going to be an opportunity for Arkansas, we've just listed here the direct formula funds. This is not the discretionary funds. And these are going to come across 5 years. They are authorized, if they're formula funds, they are authorized and have to be appropriated. So I know, you know, like the first week, I got a lot of calls saying, where's the money? Where's the money? I'm like, well, the federal government has to pass a budget for those funds to go. Kevin's laughing because he understands they have to pass a budget. So some of that money has begun to flow, and we have also begun to see some of these grant projects, and especially with the grant project opportunities, those are coming and they're out, and you all are having to respond very. This is a marathon, though not a sprint, although we're sprinting right now to really understand, you know, you received a lot of money from ARPA. What are those gaps that then, you know, might be able to be utilized through IJA, or are there opportunities to leverage the two things? I think, you know, broadband is one of those great examples where a lot of money has flowed, but IJA really provides a lane of funding that is different from what you have seen before. And how does all that come together? So I'm always kind of hesitant to put up like these big numbers, because people think, oh, you know, they have $4 billion sitting there right now. That's obviously not what it looks like. And I think one of the things we're going to talk about is really making sure that there are some reporting mechanisms and some dashboards that can share with the public so that they understand, Secretary Q, you know, as you said, what is here today and what is coming and what are those opportunities, so that the public is really aware in Arkansas about what's going on. So obviously, I think, you know, maybe a couple other things I would call out on this list. I know you all are already quickly pursuing the EV opportunities. Resiliency is certainly one of those things that is on this list that we're seeing, you know, seeing new opportunities with. The nice thing is if you're on the emergency management side, you're used to dealing with federal funds, so this is not a new rodeo. I know conservation, the conservation, I should say it right since I ran the department, but they've just released conservation funds, seeing those kind of things flow as well. So, you know, clearly a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of work for you all with staff that already have full-time jobs that have whole new grant opportunities to pursue. One of the things we hope we leave here today with is that we are here to help you and certainly want to be a resource to you. All right, maybe let's go to the next slide. I mean, I could talk about this in each specific program for a couple of hours, but I won't do that today. We can visit offline if you want to do that. So let me tell you a little bit about Deloitte and Deloitte's infrastructure experience. I mentioned that we have over 700 professionals currently supporting Arkansas. We are a global consulting firm, and so we have a really global infrastructure business, and we that at about 1.5 billion. I would say that, you know, I think that one of the things we hope to be able to do is share some of that global knowledge about ways to deliver projects that are not just necessarily how we do it in the United States, but thinking about some of the best practices around the world. We also have years of experience in grants management. We have helped states across the country to manage federal grants, and especially as it relates to disaster funds. So, you know, major disasters, for example, state of Louisiana has been one of our clients, long-standing clients for many, many years, and helps them manage their Katrina funds. We have infrastructure projects, whether that be, you know, sometimes those are public-private projects, capital management projects in over 48 states. And we also have over 6,000 PMI certified project management professionals. So we really are trying to, you know, bring the full breadth of the firm as we work to support Arkansas. And I think Amy's going to talk about some specifics around that. And we are going to take questions at the end, so please have them ready for us. We want to make sure we get to all your questions. Amy?
Yeah, and Heidi, thank you. I will let the committee know these slides will be available and we'll send those out, so you don't have to take notes today, but so you'll be able to see a little bit up close and personal. It'll be a little easier for viewing. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Heidi. Good afternoon. My name is Amy Chu. I'm a manager at Deloitte. I've been here almost a year now. And prior to that, I worked for the federal government, where I did community engagement, and I was the public engagement director. At Deloitte, I primarily focus on helping clients, state and local governments, with American Rescue Plan implementation, and that's kind of transitioned into infrastructure support as well. As Heidi noted, we do a lot of different things at Deloitte, and so I want to talk a little bit about our specific capabilities that can support you all for the infrastructure bill itself. Troy, can you go to the next slide, please? So what you see here is 8 major areas, and I wanted to highlight these because of the number of grants that kind of fall into each of these categories, right? Transportation is the big one. That money is probably the first one that's been out the door. And as Heidi mentioned earlier, some of that funding was renewed, some of it has been increased. And so there's just a lot of opportunity when it comes to transportation, whether that's roads, bridges, resurfacing your roads. There's just so many different opportunities, some of it in formula grants, but then a lot of it also competitive. Of course, there's airport money as well. I know that there was recently announced different amounts of money that each of the airports in Arkansas have already received. In addition to that, there's like competitive grants for terminal improvements and things like that. Electrification is a big one. That's where a lot of the new programming is, whether it's in electric vehicles, electric vehicle infrastructure, or electric grid resilience, innovation. There's just a lot of new opportunities that are very exciting when it comes to electrification. And I think that's an opportunity for you all to think about how to stand up new programs and things like that. Water is a big one. There's over $400 billion in new programming or in discretionary funds. And then a lot of that new programming, there's about $55 billion of it dedicated to water, whether that's drinking water, stormwater, wastewater infrastructure. And we have a lot of expertise when it comes to water infrastructure and supporting our clients with that. Broadband also really big. Feels like everyone's talking about broadband right out the gate. There's money for rural broadband specifically, which I think is very important. But there's also some new funding around things like statewide digital equity planning and things like that that will require putting together a plan and then also figuring out how you're going to implement those plans. Of course, power, energy, and resilience, there's just so much packed into that. And some of the competitive grant I find really interesting, and those are opportunities for partnership with industry or partnership with your academic institutions. But there's solar innovation. John mentioned hydrogen hubs. There's also a lot of talk about batteries and battery manufacturing, battery disposal, and battery innovation in general. And I think there's a lot. I know energy and environment is well represented on this committee, and so there's a lot we can talk about there. And then Heidi mentioned, and John mentioned both, that cybersecurity is a big one, right? So there's direct funding to state and local government to kind of consider cybersecurity. There's also opportunities for innovation, and those are more competitive grants where you can, again, partner with private industry and academic institutions as we research how to make sure that our infrastructure is robust and resilient when it comes to cybersecurity. And finally, this is one of our newer offerings at Deloitte. We had people doing climate work and sustainability all across, and so we kind of organized it into one team so that we could support all of our clients who are interested in that. And climate kind of spans a lot of different things, whether that's improving facilities and their impact on the climate, or this is where some of that Justice 40 information is coming through. And then also, a lot of that's around resiliency, right? So there's like a lot of funding for wildfires, that's new programming. And then there's also there's a seed funding program. So for national seed programs, there's a lot of different things that kind of fall under climate. And so I know, like Heidi mentioned, that you all have full-time jobs already. And so we're really here to help you navigate all the different grant streams that are reflected in these 8 categories, and then some of the other ones as well. Can we go to the next slide, please? And so here we have kind of the things that we are able to help you with. As Secretary Keough mentioned, we've already worked out a lot of the terms and things like that to kind of make it as smooth as possible and for us to get working as quickly as possible for you. And so I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what we're offering to each of your agencies when it comes to navigating these grants. We can start at the very beginning with you and have a conversation about what makes sense, how you want to approach it, what is the current capacity of your team and where can we kind of step in and help out. We can take a look at your current policies and how that fits together, but we can also help with grants. Once you figure out, hey, these are the grants that we think make the most sense for Arkansas. Can you help us put some of that information together? Can you help us organize it? Can you just make sure that it gets out on time? All of those things we can help with. And then once you're successful and you've received those grant dollars, we can also help you manage that. If you want to do new programs or you pass through those dollars to your state and local governments, we can help with that as well. And then I think this is probably new from CARES into ARPA, but I think it's going to continue forward into other major legislation. It's just there's an expectation from the public now about being involved and engaged in those conversations, right? And so you'll see throughout some of the competitive grants, how are you engaging the community? How are you communicating? And then, as John mentioned, there's also a lot of like public transparency and reporting after the fact. And we can definitely help you out with that. We make dashboards, we can do reports, and we can support you throughout that whole process as well. Yeah, I think that is it for my part. Oh, you know what? I almost missed the most exciting part. All of the work that we do is backed by a suite of technology assets that we're all very excited about. Starting with the Deloitte Funding Inventory Tool, where it's a database of the funding streams. Right now, there's almost 700 different funding streams in there, and we track when things are due, when reports are due, who's supposed to respond, who's eligible, right? So if you're a nonprofit and you're like, what can I apply for in the infrastructure bill? We can type that in and we can pull up the specific grant streams that you're eligible for. We can do that with an academic institution. We can do that with a private business as well. We also have technology that can help you plan your transit infrastructure. And there's some grant streams in there around like new and thoughtful ways to approach transit planning that I think are very intriguing. We also can help you make sure that that grants management process is as smooth and easy as possible, right? We have a lot of different technology that we put in place to make sure that from the application of the grant all the way through closeout, we kind of track all the documents that you need and we put together reports for you. And then all the way through, we also can do dashboards. We can help all these systems talk to each other, and we can help all of you coordinate the information that you are responsible for individually into something that is manageable and digestible for the general public. So very eager to have conversations with all of you in the coming weeks about how we might be able to work together. And with that, I'll hand it over to Matthew.
Thank you, Amy, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matthew Bartley with Deloitte Consulting, and very glad to be with you here today. My background is in local government. For the past 8 years before I started with Deloitte, I was working at the City of Atlanta, most lately as the Deputy Chief Operating Officer and the Director of Innovation. And before that, if you're picking out the accent, I spent 6 years working at the federal level, supporting the New Zealand government in the areas of energy and resources and economic development. I'm going to talk, if we could flip to the next slide, please, talk briefly about a few of the initial areas of support that we think could also be helpful to this committee to really put in place a foundation of interagency coordination that can support the efforts of the agencies that you all represent to be working together moving forward these infrastructure opportunities. I'll then sort of circle back to all of the options that Amy laid out and talk a little bit about how we would suggest we can move that forward with each of you over the coming weeks. So the first area of cross-agency support that we wanted to highlight here is to facilitate an Ipac strategy workshop. And really what we anticipate here is a day-long strategy session to include you all and other key stakeholders to align everybody on a set of cross-agency priorities. So the goal really to establish the vision, priorities we can align on, and then inform how we think about grant prioritization and the overall infrastructure roadmap. This, I'll just mention, this is something that Deloitte has a lot of capability and a lot of experience designing and delivering with C-suite level and agency leaders. And so we're excited to share this approach for you all here for your collective IJA efforts. The second item we have called out here is really around documenting and pulling together at the statewide level an infrastructure strategy and opportunity opportunity roadmap. And this is really, as I say, really about pulling together and integrating all of the work that has already been done, combining that with the outputs of the strategy session and really overlaying that then with the pipeline of those grant opportunities. And in doing so, to then establish a clear plan for all agencies to align around and move forward. Third thing I'll note here is really around the governance and thinking about how we can organize to sort of maximize the benefits that we're getting and the way that we're working and coordinating with one another with this Ipac group to make this process as efficient and beneficial as possible. So part of that is really thinking through the right way to frame up and think about subcommittees, which I know I mentioned in the governor's executive order, so that work can then proceed at the agency level with the decisions cascading up to this body as appropriate. Amy mentioned briefly stakeholder engagement, and so one of the other things we would suggest might be an initial effort in support of establishing that foundation is really around building that stakeholder engagement plan. In the same spirit of coordination that we're talking about, sort of the strategy piece and the governance piece, we think there's value in developing a strategic engagement plan that can bring together the views of IPAC and the respective agencies to really identify who are those key stakeholders that ought to be engaged on this work as it moves forward. So part of that would lay out recommended approaches on how we engage with stakeholders. Part of that would include communications assets, or could include communications assets to facilitate that engagement with you as well. So these are a few of the sort of initial thoughts around what might be some beneficial cross-agency activities that again, we think could help move the committee forward in its business. Let me pivot briefly for a second and just also touch on a couple of reporting related tasks that we think could be helpful to stand up front. And then we can close out with some suggested next steps. So the first one here in the darker shade of the two blue icons, this is really about establishing a public-facing dashboard that can serve as that central resource for communicating out about the funds received, funds allocated, grant application, and program progress updates. Again, this is something that the team has a lot of experience building out, and it can really serve as a helpful sort of one-stop resource for folks and the general public to receive information, as well as helping to coordinate consistent information across entities and really just keep folks on the same page status-wise. The last one in the lighter blue, that's really around taking the current reporting approach that I know is already in place, that's been stood up to track progress, and really looking to automate that, and so that is really a bit easier for you all to use, to manage, and to pull from in a consistent way. So those are some initial thoughts around how we think at the cross-agency level, and in addition to the direct agency support, we could be supportive. In terms of those next steps, we would like to reach out to each of you all over the coming weeks to really facilitate one-on-ones and better understand where you are at currently in this process, how we might be able to assist you, and also importantly to share with you the process in a bit more detail, by which you're able to, as Secretary Keogh noted at the outset, request services under the contract that has been established. So, the capabilities that Amy spoke to on the prior couple of pages, those are the sorts of things that are reflected in that form, and things that we're excited to talk to you all about. With that, I will turn it back to John.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks, committee. That's the presentation we prepared, and Secretary Keogh, as Heidi mentioned, we're certainly open to answering questions you may have about the process or anything we covered today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And a lot of information for this group to take in real quick. And so I will encourage you to go back and, as we provide these slides, give you more information. I know that also, you might not have noticed, but in the materials in front of you, besides the weekly report that shows In fact, there are a lot of things starting to roll out, and we got to get on top of this stuff. There is a statement of work request form that was put together by Deloitte that will, and maybe y'all can speak to that a little bit, but this is where you would be able to avail yourself of their services through this process. So you have a copy of the process that they've developed as a form that makes it simpler, so you know the kind of information they need to put you to get the process rolling with them. But as they mentioned, that's more specific work. I think what we were talking about just in the last presentation was an effort for the committee to understand where everybody is. These one-on-one discussions, what we think would be very helpful if you're open to that conversation with Deloitte, just to let them assess that, where you are, what your needs might be, and then you can individually work with them to see if any of those ultimately result in a request of their work, or if it's just more of a where they can report back to me as chair and others that we can kind of indicate where we are. So yeah, we might want to switch back off the presentation so we can go live back to the people in the room. Thank you, Troy. And but I'd like to really just open it up now for questions and answers. You might have something you need to say based on what I just said, so I'll turn it back to you quickly, but I do want to reserve some time for these folks at the table to see if they have any initial questions. I have a few, but I'm going to reserve mine to the end. So
I was just going to say the statement of work is, we have sort of examples in there, and we also put a menu so you could check it, and it has a rate card in it as well. So, and I think we can also provide the SOW or the we've been calling it internally an MSA. Procurement called it a statement of work. So maybe we'll all get on the MSA bandwagon, but the overarching MSA, has a very complete listing of what you can utilize our services for, and so we can also provide that.
okay. Anyone, Julie?
Are there other states other than Arkansas specifically you're doing work on infrastructure? And if so, what are those states?
Yes. We are doing work in Tennessee. We've just signed an agreement in Tennessee, and we are going to do some work in New York.
Yeah, for the committee's sake, in meeting with other infrastructure advisors, a number of them have not started, that indicated that they may go seek consultant support, but they're in the early phases. I think we were one of the first ones out with the requests for proposals for this. So partly that was to tie them up so nobody else could get to them quickly. But it was also to just, and in fact now I think our process is being kind of used as a model for some of the other states as they look at what they need. Some states already have some consultants or allowing their departments, like you can use your own individual consultants to pursue these things, but having someone to provide support to the entire committee universally, we thought had benefit. And I believe, especially on the fiscal control side of it, Dr. Walther, you might, that at some point, all of us are accountable, and individually we're going to be accountable to those grant awards that we get from federal agencies, but ultimately the state needs a line of sight to make sure that we're doing all this properly too. So is that a fair statement?
The question I have, if you're dealing in other states as well as Arkansas, where do each of these states stand? Are any of them anywhere along the process of starting to receive the money and starting to spend and apply those to the projects that can be used for?
Well, so what I would say is in both of those states, like we just obtain that work, and it's much more limited than what you all have proposed. So it's some strategy work in New York, and the Tennessee work is around. It's around strategy. It's an MSA as well. So that also none of that has begun yet. So really, I would say, you all are leading in terms of having a committee that, not just a single agency, but a committee and an MSA that agencies can begin to work off of very quickly. What we're seeing is there were some early grants that came out, right? The EV grant is due in August. And so states are having to move really quickly to get prepared for that. So there are definitely grants that are rolling out, and states are, what we're hearing as we talk to other states, and quite frankly, NGA, is that states are already stretched, and they're trying to figure out how to take this opportunity and really utilize it, but to do so with what are already stretched and limited resources. The piece of this is that you've got grants that are coming out. This is just the first year, right? These grants are going to have to be reapplied for and renewed, for the next 5 years. It's a 5-year program. So states are really still getting spun up to respond. I think, the transportation side is a little bit different, Mr. Secretary, because it's the reauthorization, of surface transportation. So they don't have, they have some new programs. I don't want to say that there's not, but it's not, you don't have a lead pipe replacement program that's the first of its kind, right? In an agency that typically doesn't get a ton of federal dollars, that all of a sudden has a grant program put out on something that they have not ever delivered before. So it's we see states and quite frankly localities trying to figure out how to best really take advantage. But you all are definitely leading the pack.
Is it fair, and I want to build on Larry's question, is it fair to say that I know at least in energy environment, some of the money, particularly like EV, where we're working with DOT, has been assigned or attributed to the state, but we're still waiting on approvals of plans and things like that before we can actually expend those funds, although there's been a portion of those funds allowed to be spent to put the plan together, if you will. But so there's that going on at DOT as they're covering those costs through their Department of Transportation. I know in our case of our Oil and Gas Commission Director or Administrator Bingham can correct me, there's been some well plugging funds that have been assigned to Arkansas. We're seeking those. We've applied for those, but I believe we've gone through a legislative review process for some of that money that came in, perhaps on, maybe it was additional formula funding on low income or LIHEAP program. Is that right, Mitchell? Is that the one that went through legislative appropriation so that we could actually put that money out on the streets? So that's the only one I know that we've actually taken over and appropriated at this point, is that LIHEAP additional formula funds. So is that what you're seeing in other states, that the money's, it's committed, but it's not, it's allocated, thank you for the word, but it's not actually in our hands ready to go out the door?
That's why I'm always hesitant, right, to put, the big over 4 billion number, for example, for Arkansas down, because, that's not like here today. That's going to be over the span of 5 years. And then, delivering on major infrastructure projects does not happen overnight, as we know. Then you have supply chain issues that are obviously going to most likely have impact as well. Have to be thought through as you think through timelines and what, where you're going to deliver various plans.
Who's next? Cynthia, you got a question? We can go around if we help. I don't know. I'm kind of watching, so you might raise your hand. I think Shane Corey may have one.
I just want to make sure I understand. So if we're in the need, if a department, specific department is in need of a consultant for a particular project, we can work with you as a vendor to kind of create what we may need for that specific project. So like if it's something as administering the program as a whole could be one piece, or maybe just say compliance with some type of Davis-Bacon requirement or something like that. We tailor what we need for a specific program. Okay.
A lot of flexibility in this contract to do exactly that. Yeah.
We literally on the statement of work, it has like it has, I think, like 9 areas that you could like check, right? Okay, I'm interested in this piece, and then give us, the details. We're trying to keep it simple.
So from almost a turnkey type operation to just a specific piece of it,
Yes.
anywhere in the middle.
And what we've done is to say, okay, we have, already allocated a team, so that if you say, right, I just need compliance help, we have resources ready to respond. And we, our expectation is to be able to say to you, okay, we've got a statement of work done and agreed to, and we're going to put people on the ground. We're going to put people to work on this immediately. So by agreeing to we reserve talent within Deloitte to do so. And then, I think you heard Amy walk through some of our expertise where there is a need, say, if we need to bring in an engineer, or we need to bring in a specialist on, 5G, whatever, we will pull from our subject matter expertise across the country, around the world, if we need to come in and meet and have that discussion.
Yeah, that's helpful. I know Damon, who's not here, has mentioned that he's going to turn somebody around quickly within a matter of hours or days. So this is not like if you need them, it's going to be a month before they call you back. I mean, this is real time support, but because we have done all this upfront work, and they have spent a lot of their own time and money preparing to do that work. So, I think the other thing is we need to look at, I know what we're finding is the federal agencies are still kind of figuring this out. So, and they're willing to fund a lot of these type of projects, getting information on compliance, getting, a proposal put together and let you upfront pay for it as long as you've got that program coming at you. So I think those federal agencies are being very flexible in how we use those funds, even though we might not have seen them yet. I think you can pre-ask, hey, can I use this money to get ready for this money? And they'll give you that blessing and move forward. So I encourage you to be thinking creatively. Don't hold back and say, I don't know where the money is. I think you can find that quickly. If you have problems, then come back to me and we can talk about maybe how we look at it differently at a state level. But I think we had a question back here.
So Heidi, you mentioned several cybersecurity projects that aren't really specified cybersecurity projects. So one of the frustrations that Director Gary and I have is that when you look at cybersecurity in a one-off fashion, it's not very effective. Just because if you're not thinking enterprise-wide. So can we engage you to help us think through the single thread that could go through these projects where we're thinking about cyber as an enterprise, but it's still one-off projects? Is that something you all have thought of? Or
yes, absolutely. And I think that's partly why we have proposed the need to have a strategy session and then really lay out a plan, right? Because the idea, whether it's cyber or whether you're laying fiber and you are, building a new road, and at the same time, going to put an EV station, right? That cross coordination is so important here in what could be a very siloed process that you would not, if you don't have that cross coordination, really leverage the funds in a way. It would be a missed opportunity. So one of the best practices that we're encouraging here and in states is to say there is opportunity to really have that cross-agency coordination, that, agencies that quite frankly haven't had to talk to each other before, right? I mean, sometimes, if you're doing sewer and water, you don't always talk to DOT to find out if they're going to widen that road, but it sure would be a good idea for them to have that conversation. And since this funding is all happening at the same time, this is where that opportunity sits.
The only thing I would add to that is we do have a top-notch cyber practice, and we talked about the workshop. I think that is one of the topics. we have some ideas for the workshop, but cyber is likely a topic that will find its way into a workshop, given the importance. So,
I think the other piece here on the cyber side, right, is the local piece, and how that is going to fit into it. And quite frankly, feeding that workforce. You had some of your higher ed announce that they were rolling out new cybersecurity workforce. One of the things we're seeing is higher ed partner with higher ed partner directly with the state, who then is providing support to the locals, and trying to create kind of an ecosystem so that you have workforce, you have, because obviously supplying that cybersecurity workforce is a major challenge across the U.S. But so you're feeding that pipeline. You're also then getting some free labor to help support some of those local demands. Cheap labor. Okay, you're right. I don't want to say students are cheap labor, but so I think that there's a lot of creativity right now that that is happening maybe in the infrastructure space about cross collaboration that just maybe that we have not that we haven't always seen.
So does the SOW allow us to engage you to discuss that?
Yes, so that would fall under the strategy piece, and we would do that.
Okay, because we are down that path in some areas. I'd say, AJ, we're moving down that path, but I would like to collaborate there because it seems like that there's a bigger picture now with some of these infrastructure engagements out there. So, okay.
Yeah, I think most people would be really surprised to look at IGEN and see all the different funding streams, right? And the feds are mandating, especially on major infrastructure in the state.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
As y'all know, our governor has signed a memorandum of understanding with Oklahoma and Louisiana to pursue a hydrogen hub, calling it the Halo Hub. How would that work where we're partnering with states who are not your clients as far as using your services to expedite or perfect our application?
Well, we work for you all. So, I mean, we would go in tandem with you. It's my thinking on it, John.
Absolutely.
That's
Unless
helpful.
Alex has a different, she's not giving me the dirty eyes, so I think that's right. I mean, the state of Arkansas, right? Specific agency is our client, so we would be there to support you.
Okay, that's helpful to know as we are discussing how to put those application proposals together. That's a conversation ongoing with Oklahoma and Louisiana as we speak on that. And some of that's being potentially funded privately too by title sponsors, but we'll work through that. But I think that's a good point, Julie. We may need to bring them to the table. Others? Questions? We mentioned the workshop, and this is one where the funding, we've got to be a little more creative on. I may have to sit down with Secretary Walther about this, but I do think that if the governor's open to this is something that Louisiana conducted a similar, I think they did like a governor's 2-day workshop or something that NGA, but other states have taken that and off of that. So if it's a value to this committee and supported by the governor, it's something that they are prepared to put together based on their meetings with each of you. So perhaps later, I guess, after some homework's done, they don't want to just have a meeting and us stare at each other. I mean, it would be a very designed meeting. So hopefully, does anyone have any thoughts about that? Pros, cons, or I know it's new to you, but it'd be more probably perhaps yourself or whoever the committee member is, and a few other, maybe key staff members, leads, on your work group, individual work groups that would probably participate in that. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll let you get that feedback as you meet with folks, and hopefully you will open your calendars up. I know we're all busy, and if you're like me, I haven't seen Arkansas much lately, but we will try to have them reach out to each of you or your committee member who you're representing today to set up that. So if you'll make them aware that if Deloitte reaches out, don't hang up on them. Please work with them to have this conversation, not only from the standpoint of they are trying to do a sales pitch, but they're really trying to bring us some information and put a cohesive report back to the governor about where we are today and what's the best way for us to move forward as a committee, but also as a state in this space. So please provide some time, and I know they'll use your time efficiently and effectively when that happens. Perhaps, are y'all looking at starting that process this month? Is that my understanding?
Yes, they should be getting emails from us, I think this week. So
that might be a good warning to those of you that if you're not, to those that back home, and let your committee member know that that's an important part of us moving forward on this. And we'll be able to share that contact information with y'all. So I know we have the Ipac email address that Donnelly sends the notices out, and and we try to provide you your weekly status reports and things through. So we'll continue to do that.
And the statement of work has contact information on it as well that was mailed out.
Yeah, so if you're ready to go and you don't want to wait on this one-on-one, that's fine. We're not saying you have to wait for that process to begin work. If you have an immediate need, I heard cybersecurity is definitely something you're focusing on quite, if there's something you want to reach out, the contract's there. So feel free to start that process on a specific need, as well as this more overall or overarching discussion of this strategic forward path. So no other questions. I think you've done an excellent job sharing your ideas and sharing the competencies, and appreciate looking forward to working with you guys and your team going forward. So with that, I think we'll probably call that other steps for this committee. Larry, do you want to comment a little bit more on you don't have any more on that? Okay, I just want to make sure we're following the right proper steps. As far as the overall functioning of the committee, I do want to encourage looking at this report. Every time I get a copy of the staff report, it gets bigger. Have you noticed? And it comes with a lot of extra information. And I know Deloitte brought to my attention that education is not on this committee, but there's a huge amount of opportunity in education. So we may be speaking to the governor's office about how we make sure that they're being supported and resourced appropriately to be able to pursue those opportunities for the state on the education side of things. So I'll reach out to Secretary Key in that respect and see how we move forward on that. But if there's other opportunities, I hope that you can, if you have any questions, Tricia is available to you, even though I know she's my staff, but she's all in the know on this. She attended a meeting with me at NGA in DC a few weeks ago, and she's got great contacts nationally too to get answers to questions that you might have around a specific program that you're looking at pursuing. And she's been key on coordinating, even I know recently on a Department of Commerce opportunity that we were looking at on a battery situation. There's just different things that I keep throwing at her or she keeps finding. So feel free to reach out to her or through either way, through me or directly to her is fine. I don't think we have any other business unless, does anyone have any specific grant opportunity or that they're working on as with, I know there's several June deadlines coming up. Does anyone want to share with the committee about any work specifically you have for June? I know I didn't ask you to provide a report, so this is more kind of off the cuff, but all right, well, we'll just keep taking those weekly staff reports, and I hope that, as we continue to work through our individual department work groups, that we'll continue to help provide the necessary information. I know the governor's looking to make some big announcements, so maybe we can help him with that. I know the money's still questionable. We're trying to get that money committed and out there, but we obviously need to make sure that we're doing the footwork and the background work to make sure those announcements do come at the appropriate time. So, and he's aware that this is a process. So with that, I'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you for those that attended.